3 a.m., tow truck driver saw my breakdown. Dead car, funeral week, rain, and the first time I cried in years.
The last person I trusted enough to cry in front of wasn't family, a lover, or the friend who can finish my jokes by the sound of the setup. It wasn't a pastor, a therapist, or anyone paid to keep their face kind. It was a stranger in a high-vis jacket at 3:12 a.m., a man who swung a boom over my dead car, fed a steel cable through a J-hook, and lit the shoulder with halogen. A tow truck driver with road salt ground into his boots and coffee the color of rain. He didn't ask for my story. He made a lane where one didn't exist, and without meaning to, made a room where I could stop being made of stone. If you want to know how a grown man gets there, start with torque and water. I grew up in a house where leaks were sins, and redemption came with a wrench. My father could listen to a wall and point to the stud, listen to a faucet and name the washer. He worked maintenance at the mill and maintenance on everything that tried to come apart at home. Hinges learned manners, tops stopped talking. He carried a four-word liturgy that covered grief, hardware, and boys. Keep it together. In our house, that line was a gasket, thin, constant, invisible until it failed. I absorbed the rule the way drywall absorbs humidity. Feelings went in labeled bins and lived on high shelves. Later, not urgent, you'll manage. I learned to swallow the heat in my throat the way you swallow aspirin. Fast, with water, no ceremony. At school, I became the kid who could find the loose screw. On teams, I was the one who drove the forgotten home. With girls, I was the dependable ride to the airport of adolescence. Useful, polite, easy to forget the second you were airborne. Approval is a dorm you can live in for years without anyone ever seeing your room. I became a plumber because water tells the truth, and because using my hands let me pretend my brain was just another tool in the bag. People think plumbing is chaos. It isn't. It's patience with physics. Water moves from high to low, occupies every gap you fail to seal, punishes hurry, rewards prep. Pipes don't lie. Joints only fail where you rushed. A day on the job has beginning, middle, end. You arrive, diagnose, cut, sweat, test, clean, leave. Someone's shoulders drop an inch, the sound of their house changes. You drive away with coffee that tastes burned on purpose, and you never have to say you saved anyone. You did the work. Jenna liked that about me, the competence without the speech. She teaches third grade like some people run border crossings, with songs, stickers, and an eye for smuggling hope. We married in a backyard. Cake, 2 short toasts, a dance my father tolerated because he loved my mother loving things. We bought a townhouse on a street where the maples paint the sidewalk every October like it's part of the HOA. Our son arrived and rounded the corners of our life. Our daughter arrived and proved roundness can have speed. Shoes by the door, socks fused by the dryer, calendars with handwriting in every square. I replaced O-rings at work and batteries at home. Heavy end of the dresser, trash to the curb and rain. Good favors, short answers.
Then my father's heart began negotiating. Numbers joined the language. Systolic, diastolic, ejection fraction. My mother delivered them in bullet points. I received them like weather advisories. The hospital wore its antiseptic perfume. Nurses moved like people who can cross grief without knocking anything over. My father told 4-word jokes instead of 10-word ones. His wrists looked like rope that had hauled a lot. I fixed their ice maker and the leak under their sink. The small maintenance a son can manage while the big machine of time does whatever it wants. I stored sadness where I store spare washers, organized, within reach, not for today. When it leaked, I tightened a half-turn past comfort and worked through it. That strategy makes you a hero to faucets and a stranger to yourself. The crack in the seals started with a blue clay whale. Allie carried it home from kindergarten with both palms underneath, a loss she made with her own hands. It lived on the coffee table for an hour. Then her elbow clipped the edge, the whale tipped, the spine broke with a clean, disrespectful sound. Her eyes filled without falling. She whispered a verdict on herself. I knelt and explained epoxy, clamps, and time. Inside, without witnesses, something in me surrendered, the way a gasket finally lets go. No drama, only correctness. That night, after the house softened into sleep, I glued the whale like I glue couplings. Steady pressure, no arguing with physics. In the morning, Allie traced the seam and called it brave. I wanted to borrow her certainty. I couldn't find the pocket it fit in. 12 quiet weeks bought themselves with numbers that didn't move. We exhaled carefully. Then everything moved. My father's breath shortened across 2 days. The doctor's face changed settings, and the monitors began speaking in tones my body understood faster than my brain could. I learned the exact color of the corridor at 3 in the morning. I learned where they hide the good ice, and which vending machine will eat your bill to remind you about the hierarchy of needs. I put my palm on my father's forearm and felt the false promise of warmth. I told him what I had fixed that week, because lists were the only sentences that didn't shake. Then I signed the line, "Son's sign." I did not cry. I poured coffee in a church hall designed to host grief on a schedule. Men lined up to donate stories like wrapped mints. He taught me not to over-tighten, to let the gasket do the sealing. He kept a headlamp in his glove box. He could feel a bad bearing through his shoe. I curated those facts like a docent in a gallery of sturdy things. The reception ended. Leftovers were boxed. Casseroles advanced on our kitchen with foil hats. Cards arrived with fonts that apologized. Plants arrived with instructions that sounded like threats. Jenna sorted them with a system. I went to the garage and lined sockets by size, the rosary of men who pray to order. Sleep turned shallow. Lists tried to be blankets and failed. I walked downstairs at 3:30 a.m., writing errands in my head like I could outpace sorrow by being useful in the morning. At the window, I watched the neighborhood do nothing. The refrigerator clicked. A car passed 2 streets over. The quiet pressed a hand on my sternum. I decided again to be granite. Grief noticed, the way water notices gravity, and looked for another way out. The night I met the man with the halogen, rain threaded the interstate into a single idea. I'd driven my mother home after we emptied my father's pockets and picked a photo for the obituary with the right ratio of proud to ordinary. The sky wanted to be loud and settled for steady. Wipers traced the same arc. The defogger made the sound of someone trying not to cough. The Civic, old, loyal, shuddered once like a man deciding whether to stand. The dash lights faded, the engine became air. Momentum lied just long enough to let me choose the shoulder. I chose an overpass where the guardrail wore a silver bruise, proof others had landed here and survived.
Hazards on, hood up. Rain uniform as white noise. Truck shouldered the air. I stared at the engine like a pilgrim at an altar he doesn't believe in. Battery new, belt still earning the word. Wet electrical smell. A smell that tells you to lower your expectations. Roadside assistance found a human voice wide awake the way night workers are. I gave mile marker and make, the note about the guardrail, the request for a long boom. Then I did what people do. Stood by the car trying to look at what's worth stopping for and not worth stopping for. Rain found the seam at my collar and appointed itself judge. Socks adopted water. Breath made little ovals on the night. I thought about Jenna pretending not to wait awake, my mother setting his glasses on the nightstand out of habit, the whale with the brave scar. The list arrived, ruthless and efficient. Suit to return, insurance call, invoice I hadn't sent because asking for money while the planet tilted felt indecent. I added smaller tasks until the list became a kind of bedtime story. Then amber light entered from the far lane and turned rain into theater. The truck idled behind me, big and patient. The driver stepped down with the stiffness of men who carry their day in their knees. Beanie. Jacket that did its job without advertising brand loyalty. A lifted hand of greeting, small semaphore. I see you. I will make this margin into a room. No attempt to own the silence. He set cones like punctuation, popped a lever, the boom sighed into place, fed cable to the J-hook like threading a needle after midnight, slid on his back into water with the resignation of men who don't own dryers big enough to make clothes forget nights like this. A whistle, not a song, just a note to keep himself company. The prose check, glance, hand to confirm what eyes already knew, weight test like a nod to gravity. When he spoke, it was logistics. Where to drop, which shop, cab or called ride. Simple, square things. He asked for keys without asking for a story. In that omission, he gave me more room than any question could. He was gentle with chain in the way men are gentle with heavy things that punish pretense. The winch did its patient pull. The Esselent ascended, groaning like a creature both trusting and skeptical. He stowed chain, killed hazards, gestured to the cab, let me choose a side as if I had agency in at least one version of this ride. The cab was warm in the way vehicles are in bad weather. Compressed human heat, the sigh of vents, the faint musk of old coffee and rain. He drove with competence I envied, a hand on the wheel, fingertip on the turn signal 3 seconds early. The radio murmured other people's insomnias. Wipers kept a tempo. The road offered its thrum like a promise. We sat in a pocket of yellow light moving through dark. I didn't talk. I watched mile markers pretend to be progress and let the city wear rain like a borrowed coat. I thought about sympathy cards with weight that makes tables lean, casseroles that breed responsibility, sentences people say that are right and still don't fit. I thought about my father's jacket on my mother's hook, sleeves bent at the elbow as if they remembered wrists. I thought about keeping it together through triage, paperwork, service, logistics, and the quiet war of who gets which knickknacks to remember a life by. I thought about how my chest had learned to be a dam.
We went under an overpass. The boom hummed like a low instrument. The sound reached inside, found the place where the list had replaced the loss, and knocked once. Not loud, precise. My throat answered with a heat I had been postponing since the wail, since the monitor, since the signature next to next of kin. His right hand shifted from wheel to dash and back, a tiny choreography. He didn't look at me. He didn't offer a shape to put the feeling in. He changed lanes with care and let the cab be a container. The first tears surprised me. I had expected a storm and got a leak. One drop, then an interval, then another. Embarrassing and correct. Tears have physics. They find slope. I tried the old swallow. The swallow only rearranged pressure. Breath went shallow in the pre-panicked way. I breathed the crawl space breath, measured, through the nose, a man avoiding fiberglass. The tears kept choosing. He set a lidded paper cup in the cradle by my knee without comment. The cup's heat wrote something small and legible in my skin. He aimed a vent toward me, an adjustment to climate, not a rescue. We rolled past a billboard promising love with a phone number. The digits blurred into hope's impression. 2 more tears did their work. I kept my face toward rain. He didn't know he'd just become the last person I trusted enough to cry in front of. He didn't need to know. Maybe that's the point of nights like this. The scaffolding is stronger because it's anonymous. We exited for the shop I use when competence needs friends. He eased the rig into their lot, parked with a geometry that told the weather it hot no say, lowered the bed, freed the chain, let the Civic touch asphalt like a thank you. He handed me keys and an invoice. I signed the line customer sign. He tipped his chin, the salute night workers give when their shifts intersect. I stepped into rain that hadn't considered stopping. That was the beginning. Not a confession to a couch, not a collapse on a carpet.
A shoulder, a truck bed, a lane made from danger, a cab warm enough to be human. I went home with wet socks and a face that had chosen honesty over pageantry, exactly long enough to stay alive. The house slept. The whale watched from the sill with its brave seam. For the first time in months, I believed I could be a father and a son without being a dam.
Morning arrived in domestic syllables, heat ticking in the vents, a cereal bowl set down with too much confidence, the refrigerator exhaling when small hands went fishing for milk. Night had ended, but the night in me hadn't. My highway socks draped on a chair like flags that had done their duty. The house smelled like laundry and cinnamon. Grief added its own weather, a low pressure that changed how doors closed. Jenna moved through the kitchen with the quiet competence she saves for days when important things remain unspoken. Sympathy cards became 2 stacks under her hands, thank you notes to write later, and the ones that could live in a shoebox until memory needed them. She checked my eyes, shoulders, breath, without making it feel like a test. I offered inventory. The car was at the shop. The drop went clean. I left out the detail about tears choosing themselves in a cab. Some truths want a room you consent to. The kitchen at 705 wasn't that room. The kids adjusted their gravity around me the way children do when a parent is made of softer material than usual. Our son watched me pour coffee with the solemn curiosity of someone studying a new species, then asked if he could take the good umbrella because weather had opinions. Our daughter asked if the whale could have a place at the table, more ritual than pottery. I agreed to both. Yes is cheap when you're short on explanations. After breakfast, I carried the whale to the windowsill. Light caught the scar and turned glue into intention. The kettle hissed. The door thumped its goodbye rhythm. Mailbox flap. Silence. Not empty. Space. I felt the mug's heat the way ceramic keeps warmth just long enough to pass it on. The shop called mid-morning with the obvious. Alternator failing, battery charged out of duty until it couldn't. Sal, steady voice, hands I trust, offered the price like weather. It would sting, not scar. I authorized the repair, asked for belts while we were there. He laughed the polite laugh of men who know I'm covering anxiety with competence and said he'd treat it like his. Work waited, as work does when it knows you'll return even when you shouldn't. Tickets piled like leaves, a ceiling bubble in a guest room, a restaurant grease trap wanting blessing, a bath faucet that screams because the cartridge forgot its purpose. I chose the ceiling. Tidy house, tired couple, apologies for mess that wasn't. I cut a square of gypsum board and watched water confess its route. Behind paint, physics told the whole story. A joint over-tightened years ago. Hairline split just proud of the fitting, whispering into insulation until gravity wrote the stain. There's a joy to solving a leak nothing else touches. Isolate, drain, cut, clean, flux, sweat. Test. The torch blue of effort gives way to the silence of a correct seal. Their shoulders dropped into place. They offered coffee with grateful insistence. I accepted, stood by the open soffit, listened to the last cooling ping resolve into ordinary air. In the microwave door's reflection, I looked like a man who had slept, not like a man who negotiated with rain on a shoulder while a stranger turned flashing amber into a sanctuary. Reflection is generous at the right angle. Lunch in the van, seat reclined. Thought about the cab, not the tears, the permission. Anonymity offered room. You can't disappoint a person who requires nothing. I'm not proud it took a stranger to coax a leak from a dam I kept for other people's sake. I'm grateful anyway. I texted thank you to the roadside number that dispatched the truck. Machinery swallowed the message. No reply came. That fit. Some acknowledgments are meant to be one way, like prayers or the good kind of advice.
Back home, domestic tasks offered the comfort of motion. I returned the ill-fitting suit to the funeral home, a building that believes in wood and silence. The clerk used gentle words the way nurses use gauze, practical, absorbent, meant to touch without sticking. I signed and left as if I hadn't rehearsed a lifetime of conversations, just to avoid the one I still couldn't make. At my mother's house, light fell apologetically, like it knew it was showing dust we didn't have energy for. Jacket on the hook, sleeves bent at elbows, remembering wrists. Mug in the sink with a tea ring like a tie blind. I replaced a hallway bulb because bulbs fail on grief's schedule too. My mother presented legal envelopes like offerings to a god of order. We opened, verified, filed. When she paused, it wasn't for words, it was for brace. I offered my arm, concrete over conversation. She asked about the car in a tone that needed something fixable. Voltage numbers as medicine. We both accepted the substitution. Evening, I salted pasta water like a man honoring a ritual he didn't understand but respected. Jenna set plates. The kids debated which song could be dessert. The whale stood witness, scar forward. After we ate, I took the trash out not because it needed doing, but because the backyard has its own version of quiet. Air damp with undecided rain, bin lid thud, a fence echo pretending to be thunder. I thought about the question that launched this. Grown men, who was the last person you trusted enough to cry in front of? If I answered out loud, I'd add footnotes. Trust wasn't heroic. It was a byproduct of a lane built in a dangerous place by someone who knew how. It happened because a stranger left the room empty of expectations and let physics be physics. Sleep tried not to wake me. Instead of dreams, my brain replayed surveillance. Boom, humming under an overpass. Halogen turning rain into needles. A cup set near my knee. Small heat, no comment. I woke before dawn and walked the house without purpose, letting floors remember my weight. Streetlight flicker, return. Sabotage crossed my mind. How people like me make undoing impossible by over-tightening everything we love. Over-tighten a joint, and you split it at the thread. Over-tighten a life, and you do the same. Morning again. Bowls, reminders, coats, even if pride says otherwise. Drop-off choreography obeyed. Living room emptied into a shop before opening. Jenna's sticking out. Call the florist, ask about late deliveries. A second note, an impatiently drawn heart. I pinned it under the lemon magnet and let it claim the soft part of a day, built from errands. Sal called. Done. Alternator, belts, a half-frayed tensioner I would have argued about if my father were in the passenger seat playing accountant to my caution. The battery would keep a charge now because the system remembered its purpose. Systems do that when you give them what they were designed to have. I idled in the lot longer than necessary, listening for the confident sound. The dash glowed uncomplicated voltage. I paid under a sign about labor rates that pre-answers complaints. Sal bagged the old alternator and asked if I wanted it. I said yes. He looked pleased in the way men look when the object they hand you will become either a lesson or a doorstop. I set it in the trunk like a trophy I hadn't earned.
Passing the overpass in daylight, the guardrail bruise looked the same. Damage rarely cares about lighting. I had the unhelpful urge to leave thanks in the air like food for a stray. I kept moving and let memory work without choreography. At home, the alternator went to the workbench. Heavy, scuffed, a thing that spun faithfully until it failed. The pulley yielded under my thumb, not because it had power, but because I did. I thought about bodies as systems: charge and draw, grief draining, ritual replenishing. How you can drive too long on a battery out of duty to motion, and how some nights require a stranger to bring a bed under you and admit that motion without current is just coasting toward a shoulder. I picked up the whale. The seam warmed under my palm. It wasn't smooth. Glue had pooled. Allie would call that brave every time she touched it. Children decide reality with words because the universe hasn't convinced them it owns the last say. I put the whale back. I sat on the kitchen floor and let the room be the cab. No halogen, no wipers, just the refrigerator's hum and the baseboard's tick. Tears didn't arrive. They didn't need to. I wasn't holding them at gunpoint anymore. Soup and bread for dinner. The kids told a story about a substitute who wrote the wrong year on the board, and time became a joke we could afford. Jenna slid her foot until it found mine and left it there. Punctuation without grammar. Later, I drove to my mother's with a toolbox I didn't need. The jacket was still on the hook. I lifted it, folded it, laid it over a chair that's only ever known guests. My mother thanked me for the nothing I'd done. We let the TV move without sound, because motion calms rooms that think too much. She said she reached for the other side of the bed and found the lie again. I said the only accurate sentence I owned. I'm here. Insufficient and real. On the way home, I passed the tow yard. Rigs slept in 2 rows, booms at rest. One truck's boom was raised a little higher than the rest, a posture that read alert, even without a driver. I considered turning in with coffees and committing the awkwardness of gratitude. I kept going. The point wasn't a scene. The point was accepting that a scene had once accepted me. Nights got quieter. The refrigerator's click sounded like yes instead of alarm. At 2:30, I sat on the stairs. Let rooms be rooms without my supervision. When Aaron's tried to reclaim me as camouflage, I said not now. Trust became something with physics in it. Tears arrived without witnesses sometimes. They had the room. The rule changed. I don't evict them to prove I know my way around a wrench. I still hadn't told Jenna the blunt version. I would. The hinge was free. The last person remained, so far. A man with road salt on his boots, whose name I didn't know. The fact felt unromantic. And exactly right. Permission had a face. It wore halogen.
Weeks learned a new gait. Still busy, less breathless. I didn't become someone else. I stopped over-tightening that last half-turn. The house noticed first. Our son's Lego towers failed at the familiar spot near the top, where ambition outruns footprint. I didn't correct the base with a load-bearing sermon. I sat on the floor, watched the collapse without flinching, and let him be mad without offering a kit for better bracing. When the steam thinned, we rebuilt with wider feet and quieter hands. No thanks required. He reached for a larger plate like someone who had learned a thing that would stay. Allie staged a show-and-tell rehearsal for the whale. She moved her palm along the seam like a docent tracing brushstrokes. Brave, she said,
in the rhythm children use when they recast the world. I listened without translating. The scar stopped being a fix and became a feature because she kept calling it one. Names alter physics. She wasn't wrong. Work steadied me. I waited for primer to dry and solder to cool without twitching to fill the space. In a restaurant basement, Nate, young tech, hands too strong for threads, over-tightened a compression nut until the ferrule split. Water knifed out with the enthusiasm of liquid's granted purpose. Old me would have performed competence to restore hierarchy. New me handed him the towel, killed the feed, and made the fix a duet. We cut back, dressed the pipe, reset the ferrule, taught torque with 2 fingers and a sentence a body remembers: stop at the gasket. When pressure returned and stayed on the right side, Nate's shoulders fell into place. His thanks sounded like relief, outrunning pride. I let him keep the lesson without interest. Friends orbited with respectful gravity. Texts arrived at safe times. Thinking of you. Can carry a box. Come sit in my garage where conversation can pretend to be about drill presses. I took Marcos up on that. His garage holds pegboards, a space heater with zeal, and a motorcycle that will run again in spring. He had coffee like a good mistake. We spoke torque specs and wire gauge until the subject grazed fathers. I didn't change lanes. I said one sentence about a monitor going flat and a pen finding a line. He nodded like a jack clicking into the correct notch and handed me a wrench I didn't need, and we tightened nothing. It helped anyway. Jenna kept offering rooms, car rides with no radio, porches with blankets, the end of the counter where her hand could find mine without speech. I began accepting. Small admissions first, delivered like trial balloons. The cab was warm. Halogen makes rain in purposeful needles. A stranger set a cup of heat near my knee and didn't ask for a story. She let the words cross the tile without demands. Later, I added the part about tears choosing their slope. She crossed with her body, not advice, and leaned into my shoulder with pressure calibrated to the ounce where comfort meets restraint. The room stayed a kitchen. The grief stayed ours. My mother's house learned me again. The jacket no longer hung. It lay folded on a chair, like clothing preparing for a new theology. Mail made stacks that looked like truth. We moved through paperwork as if pocking a campsite we'd return to. A label here, a binder there. Soup with too much pepper because she believes spice equals appetite equals proof of life. When her spoon rattled the bowl's rim, I didn't inventory symptoms. I didn't move away. The silence stopped working as a prosecutor. She asked about the car. I gave her voltage, practical nouns that make days pick sides. Later, in the holidays room, she opened my father's pocket knife and closed it, rehearsal as magic. The steel clicked like a starter catching on a second try. She set it down. We didn't fill the air with brave styrofoam.
We visited the cemetery on a sky blue day that felt undeserved. The ground kept promises. Grass respected edges. She held the crook of my elbow like weddings and stairs. No tears, no heroics, weather between fronts. On the ride home, she asked if I had eaten, that ancient question whose real translation is, can you still do the basics of belonging to a body? I had. She packed leftovers anyway. Lids clicked like reassurance. I carried food to the car with ceremony food deserves. I passed the tow yard 3 times before I turned in. Chainlink has the tired dignity of fences that hold more than metal. Rigs slept in 2 neat rows, booms at rest, orange beacons inert in honest daylight. In the prefab office, the same woman sat at the desk, company sweatshirt, eyes that prefer nouns. I carried in coffees and an envelope addressed to Night Crew, mile marker under the overpass, Halligan Chapel. Inside, a gift card and a note that refused to apologize for sentiment. You made a lane, I made it home. My father didn't, but I did. Thank you for turning danger into a room. She read the envelope's face, then me, and made the expression of a person receiving a thing they don't have to sweep. She promised to route it where it wanted to go. That was enough. I didn't ask to meet the driver. Part of the grace was the anonymity, the way the moment belonged to the night. Shake hands in sunlight and the scene calcifies into a moral it didn't ask to be. I wanted the truck as a verb, not a person. Machinery saved me because a man ran it right. That was the order. I kept a coffee, set it in the Civic's cup holder like a candle I wouldn't light. Shifts widened at home. Our son brought a permission slip with a chaperone blank. Old me would have defaulted to no. New me found a way to yes that didn't break the week. On the bus, vinyl and snack air did their work. A museum guide turned birds into time machines. My son checked my face twice to gauge boredom versus presence. I taught my face a quieter excitement, the kind that lets a kid claim a room without asking if the room is worth it. He fell asleep in the practiced forward hinge of children. I watched the soft surrender and felt no urge to fix anything. At soccer, rain stitched the evening into one piece. Coaches voted not to cancel. Kids ran because running is a treaty with weather. When Allie hooked a shot wide, her shoulders jumped the way disappointment trains them to. Advice rose to my tongue. Plant foot here, hip there. And I stopped mid-step. I mimed breath and two palms. Down. She mirrored. The next shot still missed. She ran harder. Effort without outcome is practice at being human. Dennis, sober a decade, maintenance on his own system done with the seriousness of people who don't humor leaks, asked me to move a couch because sobriety keeps you on speed dial for stairs. We got the angle right, avoided paint scuffs, and sat on steps letting sweaty air do its slow work. He told a story about the first time he cried in front of someone who could have used it against him and didn't. Not a sermon, inventory. I told him about the cab, nouns only. He listened like a man measuring voltage. Does it hold? Does it drop under load? 2 shoulder pats, no drama. We carried the last end. The cushion sighed like wood learning its job. Minimum laughter, maximum relief. Nights felt less like stages and more like shops with tools within reach. The refrigerator's click said yes. At 2:30, I sat on the stairs and let rooms be rooms. When errands tried to repaint themselves as compassion, I said, not now. The alternator on the bench stared back, a heavy reminder. Motion without current is coasting. I kept small vows. Answer honestly when allowed. Stop over-tightening to earn worth. Treat tears as physics, not failure. Let kids see me sit still. Oil tools. Choose rituals that feed charge. Eventually, I told Jenna the blunt sentence. The last person I trusted enough to cry in front of was a tow truck driver whose name I don't know. She didn't flinch at the unromantic fact or try to dress it in meaning. Her hand found mine and made punctuation. That night, she tucked her foot against my calf. No trumpets. Just sleep that felt like consent, not surrender. One more thing remained, the conversation with my mother that didn't hide behind calendars, and a dawn visit to the yard timed for names without breaking the spell. The hinge was free. The lane existed. I could build my own.
I stopped using appointments as scaffolding for presents and picked a Thursday with no errands attached. Groceries that meant comfort more than work. Chicken already cut for soup. Celery that smells like effort without needing artistry. Noodles that forgive. The pot went on, salt went in, the stove wrote the room's temperature. The house had learned its new sound, one fewer voice, everything else refusing to overcompensate. We ate from bowls with the right spoons, not the company set. No television, a square of honest blue in the window. My mother told me the neighbor boy rolled the bins up without being asked, and how that small decency rearranged the afternoon. I told her Sal had given me the dead alternator, and I put it on the bench as a reminder that charge and draw are not metaphors, unless you force them. She asked how the car was doing in the tone that means, give me a thing that works. Voltage as medicine. She swallowed it. When bowls emptied, I carried a sentence across the table like glass. There was a night when a stranger made a lane, and I borrowed it as a room. Nouns first. Adjectives found their spots by themselves. I didn't tally tears or describe the hum beneath the overpass. Enough to be true, not so much the story became weight. She listened with the eyes she used when I came home scraped and wanted to rename the pain. A nod that said she had expected men in our line to be saved by torque and was relieved to know the saver sometimes brings cable and halogen. We didn't cry. We didn't avoid the place crying might have lived either. Silence gave up prosecution and took a job as space. Before I left, I fixed the front door latch that had begun missing its strike like a tired dancer. We needed something to close with a clean, affirmative click. On the mat, she touched my sleeve and left her hand there long enough to count as language. I know. I see. I'm here. 3 mornings later, Dawn still arguing its case, I went back to the yard. Less fort, more field hospital between calls. Donuts in a box that pretended to be warm, coffees that lost the fight on the short drive anyway. The office door stuck on humidity, then gave, like doors do when you insist correctly. The same woman nodded toward the clock. Night was clocking out. He came in 2 minutes later, the man who turned flashing amber into sanctuary. Daylight made him taller. Halogen had lied. Road salt had become dust. The beanie retired to hair flattened by hats. Boots unchanged, honest about work. Recognition stayed small. Half nod, civic, overpass, rain that meant business. Blink, yes, and thank you that won't embarrass us. Names introduced themselves without ceremony. His, Ray, mine the one Racitius. He accepted coffee, cracked the lid for the smell, shifted his weight like a body that keeps score. The line I'd rehearsed wrote out clean. There was a night when the lane you made was the only room big enough for the kind of person I had to be, and I made it home. He nodded. He gave me the sentence I didn't know I needed. We make lanes. People drive them. That's the job. Not bigger, not smaller. The donut box became a table. Sugar negotiating with fatigue. A call came over the radio. He tapped his lid twice, gratitude without speech, and went. The door closed with the truck sound I like. Heavy, sure, not unkind. Beacon slept. Light still suggested itself. At home, the morning had started without me. Bowls, backpacks, one sock confessing from under the couch. Jenna brushed past, shampoo not trying to be a personality. Her eyebrows asked, my shrug answered. Good. And enough. A small smile, the kind partners give when they approve of both the errand and the way you understate your own courage.
Saturday, we went to the river where the old dam lives. Modest structure, men once believing obedience from water was a matter of will and poured concrete accordingly. Spring had pushed the flow loud without threatening. We stood at the railing and let the noise make conversation optional. Dams are tools, not personalities, I told them. Rivers win by remembering persistence. We watched the fish ladder, an improbable stare that admits the river has opinions. Silver moved in the froth where design allowed stubbornness a route. The kids asked good questions and silly ones. Our son wanted to know if dams can cry. Allie wanted to know if the ladder makes fish brave or just wet. Cause and effect for answers. Metaphors can fend for themselves. Bench. Sandwiches now bred confetti. Down the path, a boy threw a stick wrong and learned currents policy on gifts. His father over-instructed with verbs. My tongue started to help and I let the river teach. The stick went where sticks go. The boy found a rock that worked better. Another kind of refitting. On the way to the car, Allie slipped her hand into mine with casual seriousness that rearranges the architecture of a man. Can Grandpa see the fish from where he is? Some people say yes, some say no. Both love the river. She decided to say yes and felt done.
Children edit reality with declarations. Our job is to build a world sturdy enough to hold the edits that matter. Sunday night, the old alternator stared from the bench like homework. I loosened housing screws just to feel a tool bite correctly and stopped before the project turned into improvement. The pulley spun, not because it had power, but because I did. Not everything useful needs a second life. Some lessons sit and remind without becoming lamps. The conversation with my mother I'd postponed turned out to be 3 small ones and a walk. We started with the porch light, still fine. Moved to photos, take the weddings now or let the holidays ask for evidence. Walked 2 blocks to the blue mailbox, errand as apology for movement. Grief didn't flare or hide, it attended. Coming back, she told me my father once cried while washing a pan after her biopsy came back merciful. She found him with his hands in the sink, water doing its uninterested job while his face did what faces are built to do. He told her later he didn't want the cry to become another task for her. She let him keep that choice and still knew. I stopped, not to dramatize but to respect the new geometry of the story I've lived beside for years. Air adjusted, like a room where someone finally moved a chair to the place it always meant to be. I didn't cry then either. I didn't chorus a scene to update the ledger. The last remains the man with road dust and halogen. That fact no longer needs defending. I kissed my mother's temple the way templates teach and trusted the day to survive tenderness without losing shape. I drafted habits my kids could actually see. I named small feelings aloud in the dumbest, most useful way. That commercial made me sad for no reason that will survive analysis. I'm angry at this jar because it pretends to be child-proof and is actually me-proof. I'm proud of how you missed and didn't kick air. Not a meeting, just a language children can learn without grammar sheets. I said I was tired instead of performing tirelessness. I said I missed my father instead of bringing home more batteries and letting objects confess for me. At bedtime, our son asked if I cried in the cab because I was scared. Truth scaled to his body. I cried because pressure is real and sometimes you need a place built to hold it while it turns back into motion. A truck can be that. A person can too. Can I be a place like that? You already are. The first time you fell asleep in the front seat and reminded me not all holding is heavy. He liked that answer because it made him taller without making him older. Jenna and I adjusted in ways that don't earn applause. We kept disagreements about thermostats and socks, but stopped recruiting them as cover for larger weather. If a hard thing needed naming, we named it and didn't choreograph it. Twice I took a walk instead of offering solutions that would have made me feel capable and the problem feel managed. Twice she returned with a verdict that didn't need me as a hero. The marriage got quieter in the best sense.
On a Tuesday rain, trying to make a point, I took the long way home and passed the overpass. The guardrail bruise remained evidence. The shoulder, where I became a person in a cab, looked ordinary because the world doesn't curate your landmarks. I didn't stop. I bumped the wipers up 1 click, a tiny concession to conditions, and let the alternator do its easy job. Turn motion into current, current into charge, charge into a light behind a dash I no longer check every minute. The hum said yes in machine syllables. The lane said yes in paint. My chest said yes, without requiring footnotes. If you ask me now, grown men, who was the last person you trusted enough to cry in front of? I will still say a tow truck driver. 3 in the morning, under a humming overpass, in a cab that smelled like coffee and rain. The answer hasn't changed because the point of the last isn't to repair the past. It's to prove permission exists. The next time might be in my kitchen, with my mother's hand on my sleeve. It might be on a sideline, stitched by weather, my son taller than memory. It might be alone, the whale on the sill, a scar that doesn't apologize. The witness matters less than the hinge moving without complaint. Torque and water, pressure and release. Joints fail at weak points, not where you stare. Alternators make charge as you move. Dams are engineering, not personalities. Lanes appear when someone who knows what they're doing places cones where danger thinks it lives. On a late night with rain making everything honest, a stranger did that for me. He made a lane. I drove it. The rest of the story is learning to build my own. inside a house that knows the new sound I make when I keep it together without pretending to be stone.